Paul, you had requested, I had you up first to speak.
I'm going to ask some questions, and I know that these are questions that are not going to be answered. But I heard, I think, someone on this dais talk about how much it's going to save, and that he's gone back, to 1997 and looked at costs. And, I think that if we spend as much time looking at the costs of other things that we have wasted money on, then we might be able to find some savings someplace else. What is human cost? What is property cost? I heard the gentleman say that his property has depreciated by, it sounds like 50%. No one should have their investment, their life savings, wiped away like that. That's why most of us in here who have a portfolio, if you know what that is, we watching the little ticker at the bottom of the screen, because that looks like that might even get wiped away like that. The rush nature of this decision. Since I've been on this particular council, we have postponed time almost. We've postponed zonings. We've postponed small decisions on small groups. We've postponed decisions on closing alleys. We've postponed decisions on Day of Remembrance. We've postponed decisions on contracts. We've postponed decisions on decisions. So we could postpone this decision. These proposals have only been in 6 days. Most of us, if we enter a contract, we're given a period of time to go back and think about it. And a lot of places now, you can buy the car, and if 3 days later you decide you don't want it, you can take it back. We won't be able to do that once this decision is made. The council has not had a full opportunity to look at these proposals. That 650 pages over there, if anybody has read it, it's probably our city manager. It's probably his staff. But we haven't had an opportunity to read all of what's in there. We can sign an extension, and that proposal, I think, is out there, that would continue this until the end of the year without reopening the White Street landfill. We could also be fair in allowing all of the possibilities to be looked at, including having the city put its recommendation out there, which, as taxpayers, you ought to want that. You ought to not want us to buy something when we have not looked at all of our options, and we haven't. If we did this with anything else, any other major purchase, y'all would have us, if we were to take what's an expensive item, fire truck, do you search around to get the best price? Okay? And then staff comes back and makes a recommendation based on how much money they got to spend and what's the best price. And sometimes we've even rewarded staff for finding us a bargain. I want to believe that the reason to move this so quickly has nothing to do with the elections, because we ought to be serving each time we come up here, and even when we're not up here, based on what we promised to do in December of 2009, and not based on whether we want to get reelected or not. I think you have 2 county commissioners here. Y'all better tell them folks we're getting ready to have them trucks coming in their neighborhood. You better tell them. Because I don't think that the county residents are going to be happy with the potential of city or of garbage trucks coming down Rankin Mill Road off of High Cone, down Huffine Mill Road, and whatever other streets are back there that are county residents. And so, county residents, if you're listening, you need to raise some sand about this, because I don't think they want this landfill in their backyards either. And I really think that the county commissioners ought to pass a resolution stating that. I have some concerns about the fact that over the course of all of this landfill stuff, and let me pause here, Mike Barber ought not be the one saying he's opposed to, because he started this mess. And shame on him. But I am concerned that 4 out of the 9 council members on this current council have at some point in time been questioned about that they may or may not have a conflict of interest. I think that this council is too conflicted to make this decision, because half or 4 out of 5 have had questions about whether or not they had a conflict, didn't have a conflict, might have a conflict, cousins and all the rest. There may also need to be a look at how the latest request for proposals have been handled that might favor one proposal over another. You know, a year ago, certain people were hollering transparency so much till it was sounding like, it was a broken record. But if you notice lately, you hadn't heard transparency, because there is none. And see, I feel like that as a council member sitting up here, I ought to say what I think we ought to not be doing or we should be doing, because I'm one of the 9 up here. Now, there's some people who says that my behavior is inappropriate, that I should be quiet and not tell what I know. Well, I'm sorry. I ain't proud of being a part of a group that is willing to hurt any part of the city of Greensboro. I have voted for projects on every side of town. I have pushed hard for the equality of services, live, work, and play for East Greensboro. And I'm not making a campaign speech here. This, as I have said before, is wrong. We do not need to do this. If you talk about whether or not we're saving money, I think that if we were to do our due diligence, first of all, some of these proposals probably wouldn't meet the mustard of what our city manager described as a possible 5-part process, instead of we're only doing A and E. This is wrong. And I'm just going to tell you, even if we enter into a contract, and even if the new city council comes on board, and even if they decide to rescind the decision of this council, it's going to cost us money. Why? We're in a time where we don't need to waste money that we don't need to waste. We got streets to pave. We got police to pay. We want to keep the high quality of life that's going to bring somebody like Honda Jet and other corporations here. Maybe the rest of these folk won't tell you, but our job growth is hanging on by fingernails. Our job growth. We want to put our citizens to work. The growth for the next 25 years, go read your comprehensive plan that those folks so eloquently wanted us to vote and change and make it feel good for the folks over near Guilford College. The growth and development of this city hinges on this decision, because the growth and development of Greensboro for the next 25 years is not going to be west, southwest, or north. It's going to be in East Greensboro. Now, I would hate to believe that this is some master plot to keep East Greensboro as the 90-pound weakling that we are now, because that's what we are. So I would hope that we would have the courage to, one, not do this at all. And if I thought that a motion would fly, I would make it, but I know it won't. But at least we don't need to make this decision tonight. And if a motion comes up to postpone it, I would postpone it for the next 120 days. That would at least get us to where we have a different perspective. And at this point, that's what we need, because this perspective up here ain't hearing you, not gonna hear you. So my final comment is this. Did we hear the children? Did you see the children? Do you care?
Okay. I'd like to, excuse me, make a few comments. And I have a few pictures I'd like to run here in a moment, too. I've listened with great interest to avoid any. I grew up in Northeast Greensboro, if anybody wants. I grew up in Northeast Greensboro, so I can speak. I lived close enough to the sewage treatment plant over that I could smell it. I lived close enough to the creek that Cone Mill dumped to die, we could smell it. And I lived south of the landfill. I know the area. I've been there. There's been a lot of talk about race, smell, rats, health, and lack of due diligence. I'd like to tell you that I, in the last two and a half months, I met with, I guess, 6 members of the Human Relations Commission, and at their request, and we talked about the landfill, and I shared the information that I'll talk to you about tonight. But we talked, and their conversation, I think, boiled down to one of health. I met more recently with three members of Greensboro Neighborhood Congress, a committee. They requested a meeting. And I think they went away with some impression that I had done a good deal of due diligence, which I have. And yes, I have gone through this information. I certainly have. I don't know, somebody said 600 pages, 500 pages. Please realize a number of those pages include references, legal information that is repetitive from the last time. You know, why read it twice? The same thing. If you will, I've shown this before, but I want to show it again because I want to make some comments about it. This is the YMCA at the landfill entrance in Winston-Salem. It's in the city limits. There's Junior Achievement across the street. There is the entrance to Haynes Brands Manufacturing next door to that. These are some residences in Winston-Salem. This is the backside, very similar to Greensboro in many respects. Here is the entry, and these maybe not in order. This is the entry that just closed in Raleigh, then north on Durant Road. Here's a medical office park, 200 yards probably from that entrance. Here across the street is a neighborhood. And there's a street, I went down, there's a street right across from the entrance to the landfill. Here are houses, you know, I don't know, these are fairly expensive homes. Could we have a little order in here, please? These are more homes. These are in Raleigh. I want to make some points after I'm saying, this is Durant Road, a very busy road. This landfill, and these things were done while it was operating. Again, this is the Winston-Salem in the city limit, and so I think I've made the cycle now, so you can do. The point I want to make is, in Winston-Salem, I've spoken with the mayor, I talked with the manager at the landfill, I talked to residents living around, and there's some homes that I think that weren't shown in Winston-Salem, but very similar to Raleigh. And I talked to the city manager in Wake County. Their new landfill is open in Holly Springs. The landfill is about a mile, I'm told, from downtown Holly Springs. The fastest growing area in Wake County. Development is pending right now, I think pending some economic issues, borrowing and things like that, according to the city manager, or county manager. I talked to the city manager. And I've asked about, in Winston-Salem, I asked, do you have a problem with smell? He said, I've been here 19 years. He said, we spray it every night. We don't have. Some of our council members have made these trips. I said, what about rodents? Said, we haven't had, in both cities, we haven't had that problem. Winston-Salem said, we have deer, some deer on the landfill. Health issues, they aren't aware of it. You know, and they are very, and the reason I point out Raleigh and Winston-Salem, they are very similar to Greensboro. They're very, very similar. I don't know that we have anything different here, and and these are white neighborhoods. That needs to be said. Look, so I've listened, so I'm asking you to listen. And there's good signs of economic development going on there, and so I just want you to know that, you know, in Greensboro, if we've got health issues, and I've got a concern that we've got people living out there. I've got concerns that we have people using a walking trail that the city built. I have concerns that we're building a new city park out there. If there are health concerns, something's wrong somewhere. Something's wrong. And it needs to be said that the glass landfill or the VIX landfill is not city-owned. It is not connected to our landfill. I don't know what it is, how long it's been there, or what. I think it's under private ownership. But these are things I just want to say. I want to be sure that this information I want to have out is said, and I've said what I want to say. So with that, I want to recognize, I believe, Dr. Wade. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we direct the city manager to begin contract negotiations with Gates City Waste Services to conduct landfill operations on Phase 3 of the White Street landfill. I further move that we restrict the volume of waste to be received at the White Street landfill to be city-only waste, and that the city clerk be directed to advertise for a public hearing on the contract award to Gates City Waste Services.
Okay, there's a motion by Dr. Wade and a second by Mrs. Rakestraw, and I see Mr. Key, you wish to speak, and then Mr. Perkins.
Yes. Mr. Mayor, I also visited Raleigh and saw the landfill that you just showed with all the development around it, and that is a closed landfill. And speaking of Raleigh, I have a letter that was sent from a state house representative to this council, and she asked me to read it. It says, "Dear Mayor and council members, I write in opposition to the current White Street landfill proposal. It fails to provide an adequate long-term solution for waste disposal for the city of Greensboro, in addition to adversely impacting a minority section of our community. This short-term solution is not cost-effective, and I understand it will only last approximately 4.5 years. This means the issue would have to be readdressed in just a few years and will be more costly. Additionally, there are more appropriate alternative long-term solutions which would not be so divisive and which would not impact such a significant portion of the city's population. The major growth potential for Greensboro is in the eastern sector, and reopening the landfill would hamper economic development for this area as well as our entire community. Therefore, in consideration of the future economic health of the community and for quality of life reasons, I request the White Street landfill not be reopened and another long-term solution be sought. With kindest regards, Pricey Harrison, State House Representative, District 57. Now, this landfill issue is a sad saga that's been going on for generations. And I have personally been opposing and fighting the landfill for a decade, at least a decade. But there's a story that's very similar to the White Street landfill. It came up in October of 2003. but it only came up once, and it hasn't resurfaced. And I want to share it with you briefly. These are the minutes of the Board of the County Commissioners at Gifford County. This is a case, and the topic is denied rezoning request for case number 42-03 AG to CUHI. That's agriculture to commercial use, heavy industrial. The chairman announced this is the time and place set to hold a public hearing on request number 42-03 to rezone from AG to CUHI. This is a legislative rezoning. Mark Krishner, planning director, explained the request. He said it includes approximately 235 acres that will consist of a Subtitle D solid waste landfill with compatible accessory uses including but not limited to recycling, solidification, and waste processing. He also said the request is effectively an expansion of an existing landfill located to the west in Forsyth County. If approved, he pointed out the landfill will be able to accept all types of waste, excluding hazardous materials and inert debris. He stated the 235 acres, of the 235 acres, only 90 acres will be used for burying fill material. Mr. Krishna goes on to say, Mr. Krishna described the character of the area and land use analysis. He said, transportation issues are significant in this rezoning. He highlighted traffic generation and truck routing. He said there are also numerous environmental factors to consider when siting a landfill, including groundwater, seismic, geology, soil type, topography, floodplain, and wetland areas. He indicated the issues would be addressed by the state during its review of the landfill permit, as will groundwater contamination. In conclusion, Mr. Krishner said in one way this is a simple rezoning case, but in another it impacts the entire community because it illustrates the solid waste issues that Gifford County faces. He stated the proposed site does not meet significant criteria related to the rezoning of the property, mainly transportation and land use compatibility. He also stated the site is not close enough to a major thoroughfare and trucks must travel too far on local streets to access the site. He brought out the fact that a solid waste landfill is an industrial activity and the predominant existing land use surrounding the property is rural residential and single-family residential. Finally, with all the facts previously stated, he said staff recommends denial of the CUHI rezoning request. And the vote was taken. The motion failed 4-6. And the noes that supported the citizens in the Oak Ridge community were Ms. Coleman, Landreth, Rakestraw, Shaw, Yao, and Wade. Now I read this to commend Dr. Wade and Ms. Rakestraw for supporting the citizens in Oak Ridge. But there's something that I can't quite put my finger on. What is the difference between the citizens of Oak Ridge and the citizens of Greensboro? You know, I'm not really worried about this landfill issue, even though I live less than a mile away, even though my business is located there. There's a law that governs physics as well as metaphysics. And this law states that in physics, if you plant an apple seed, it grows and becomes a tree. and it bears many apples, hundreds, even thousands of apples. Well, the same law governs metaphysics or spirituality. When you commit a deed, it's just like planting a deed in the soil of life. And that deed grows, and it's just like the apple tree. It produces many deeds of the same nature. So I know that whatever the outcome is, it's going to be governed by this law. And so I'm telling you, citizens, don't worry about the vote here tonight, because this issue is not over.
Mr. Perkins.
Mr. Key, it's pretty hard to follow that. And I commend you for your statement, because I agree with everything that you've said. You know, we have clearly heard a number of citizens state the argument against moving forward with this tonight. And they have stated it in such a persuasive way that I find it incredible to believe that we are considering a vote on this issue. In a previous item tonight, speakers were commended about being serious about a plan from the beginning. It was clearly the best way for their neighborhood to develop. It involves strategy and should pass 9-0. Further, does this decision pass the test of thought, preparation, and process? I think not. No one can look at the process that we have been through over the past 18 months regarding this landfill situation and say that it has been anything but a disaster. Every single piece had an element of manipulation that was designed to go to a defined outcome. The outcome has one ending based on where I see the majority of this council going, and I find it appalling. This issue has divided our community unlike no other. If you've truly done your due diligence, if you have truly done your due diligence in this particular aspect, how can you not postpone this and do a meaningful amount of research on a letter that you got from one of the largest haulers in the country saying that you can save $3.5 million a year without putting this community through this level of stress? This is going to affect every decision that we make in this community until we solve this problem. Best case, we're deferring it. We're kicking the can down the road. We're buying 4.4 years to 7.5 years, depending on how much trash goes in the dump. We've ignored the pleas from the community. In 2003, when I made a decision to vote in support of doing the transfer station option, the worst case scenario that our council on a 9-0 vote agreed on was the scenario that we are marching down tonight. The worst case scenario is for us to use up all of our capacity without a long-term plan in place. We have no plan beyond this. Thank you.
Okay, a couple of things. One, and Mr. Key is right, and I was down before you. You'll be recognized. You get your turn, please. Mr. Key was correct about the landfill in Raleigh. It was closed. It was closed 2 years ago, the one on Durant Road. But while it was an operating landfill, There was significant, most of the development, if not all the development, occurred while it was an operating landfill. Right now, the Wake County school system has plans to build a school right there. There are plans to build some playing fields right there. I'll say that now. I had a message. Mike Barber was a former council member, former commissioner, was mentioned a few minutes ago, and he asked, he would appreciate me speaking on his behalf on this, and I'm just going to briefly say this, what he said. He did return a phone call to Chris Brooks, and Mike said if the capacity is used up, we lose future leverage to contract, and to this council's credit, they have found up to $5 million in savings annually regarding the landfill. That's all I want to say. Ms. Bellamy Small, you wish to speak.
I make a motion that we table this decision until we have an opportunity to investigate why the third highest bidder on this project was considered. There is something wrong here.
Let's see, who's...
So my motion is to table and for 90 days. And that an investigation to how we have come about these decisions without going through the best practices be done.
The motion is really to postpone for 90 days, correct?
That was a motion to table, I believe. Did I hear that?
The motion was to postpone for 90 days.
Motion to postpone for 90 days. This is a substitute motion, I believe.
No, it is. It's just a subsidiary motion. You can go ahead and take a
Okay, a
vote.
subsidiary motion, so we shall vote whether to accept. First, discussion on the motion. Discussion. Mr. Thompson.
This is, I believe, the Dr. Wade's, in her motion, she was talking about, she moved that we operate the landfill for just city-collected MSW. Is that correct? And as I look at the chart here and the ranking of the companies, just to get clarification, under scenario B, city-collected MSW only, and all C and D, the company that she mentioned, Gate City Waste Services, down at the bottom of their rank is second. Is that correct, Mr. Redling, or I guess Mr. Wyrick? Or?
Yes. That's correct.
It's ranked second behind Advanced being first. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted a clarification on that, since the motion was made incorrectly.
Okay, we have a subsidiary motion. And Mr. Perkins.
Yeah, and again, I'm concerned, and will my mind on this subsidiary motion will be made up based on what I hear justification for the rationale for the motion to be, and because I think that what I heard in Ms. Bellamy Small's motion was clearly an indication or questioning of propriety of the motion. Based on the selection of the contractor. And that, in my view, is a very serious accusation or charge. And if we're going to be transparent about this decision, then I'd like to hear from the folks that are considering voting for this motion why and how they can justify it. Otherwise, I'm going to have to support Ms. Bellamy Small's motion to postpone and ask for some sort of investigation.
Thank you. Okay, we do have a subsidiary motion that we can now, is there any discussion about the motion, the subsidiary motion? If not, the council will please vote on the subsidiary motion.
To postpone for 90 days, that's what you're voting on.
And the motion fails 3-4. Now we have the main motion. And the main motion has been made and seconded. Seeing no further discussion, council, please vote. We're voting on the main motion. I've already called for a vote. I'd call for a vote. Mr. Attorney, I had called for a vote, and I see Ms. Bellamy Small's hand up after I had called for the vote.
Now, I can do this one of two ways. I can respect you as a mayor and not say anything, or I can go ahead and ask my question. How do you want it?
Please ask your question.
I want to know how it is, and you help me, Mr. Manager, if I'm wrong on this. Is it not normally our policy to look at the lowest bidder or the lowest responsible bid whenever we look at a contract?
Ms. Bellamy Small, you're required to look at the lowest responsible bid. The city attorney had sent out an advisory last week about the steps the council should follow to evaluate these proposals. It's dated August 11th. The statute requires that you look at certain things in making this decision. I think the salient point in his memo, and he can speak to that and further if he would like to, or if I misspeak, is that you have to evaluate the responses on the criteria as set forth in the RFP. Price is one of those items, but there are other items that you have to make an evaluation and determination of in making that decision.
The bottom line in the statute is that you're basing the determination that the selected proposal is more responsive to the request for proposals. That's what the statutory standard is.
Okay, and that basically is a judgment called by the person who has made the motion, and not necessarily the collective. Is that what you're saying?
It's a judgment called by the city council as evidenced by the vote as a body, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, then
Go ahead.
okay. Then are we in a position to vote on this motion based on the fact that that these criteria have not been made, or do we just have to vote it up or vote it down?
The makers of the motion are responsible for articulating that rationale, not us, and so that response does not fall to us. That falls to the body making the decision and the vote.
Beg your pardon? Well, I don't think Councilwoman Wade is going to give us an explanation as to why she selected this particular one.
Okay. Council, we will now vote on the main motion. And motion passes 4-3. Thank you. Okay. Yes, okay. We need